What is going on, guys? What a time we live in. Crazy couple of days in crypto. We've got FOMC. Things are going to get even more strange. Welcome back to the channel. I do have a clear vision of what I want to do, and I want to share that with you today. So anyone watching this, smash a like and let's go. So guys, the first of all, inflation is a real problem now. You've got the tariffs lingering, plus you've got the war. Energy increase leads to food prices higher. Food prices, of course, you got 70, oil prices went as high as, you've got, $84. And of course, energy prices have been declining since Trump came in. You can see here in January, they were kind of like at around $79, $80. And then they've got as low as $57 a barrel. Now, of course, these are now going up. And largely, this is to do with this absolute uncertainty of what's going to happen for the rest of the world. Markets hate uncertainty, and uncertainty leads to global prices of certain items either increasing and certain stocks dumping. So, for example, armament stocks, defense stocks have been skyrocketing because, again, the world engineers a conflict every 20 years. Whether you're looking at the first Gulf War, which took America 30 years between the first Gulf War and the second Iraq War, when they said, they had weapons of mass destruction. We've heard this before. We've heard this in Libya. We've heard this in Syria. Of course, you could even argue if Gaddafi or Assad was still in power, you wouldn't get all these refugees going around the rest of the world, let alone imagining 90 million plus Iranians displaced. It's absolutely insane right now, but we care about our bags and we want to focus on our bags and what the hell is going to happen. So tomorrow we've got FOMC. Of course, I'm not expecting anything here, and you can see the market has already 99.8% of the market agrees that the rates will be the same. Job done. Thank you very much. What else can happen here? Well, Jerome can talk about sticky inflation, and he can definitely talk about why inflation needs to come down and, the usual play. But the real fear for me is what he's going to do for the rest of the year. Now, if you look at I want to show you something here, okay? So you can already see that oil tankers on fire at the Strait of Hormuz. Remember, this is a body of water that's about 30 to 31 kilometers, wide at most. And I'm going to show you how things can get worse. For those of you historians here, you would know this. This happened during the Gulf War. It happened during the Iran-Iraq War, and you could almost argue 24% to 25% of global energy flows through this body of water, and this is the Strait of Hormuz. Here, at its narrowest point, you could literally swim across 30 miles or so from one side to the other. You can actually see traffic is slightly concentrated towards the bottom before you enter this body of water. And, this data is very, very accurate. You can actually go and, of course, get the details of any oil tanker that's going through there. This is a, Angolan flag. There's Liberia is probably one of the most favorite flags of these oil tankers. But you can see 24% to 25% of the global oil and energy supplies, natural gas, flow through here. In addition to that, Israel have struck this port here called Bandar Abbas. This is where Iran ships a lot of energy from. So if they're obviously left with no choice, they could set this thing alight. And that means catastrophic inflation, oil prices, shit goes to shit, right? And unfortunately, it's not just your luck, but it's last 2 years. Certainly the last 6 months have aged us a lot. First, we had the presidential meme coin. After that, we've had the unfortunate situation where we obviously had to suffer the tariffs. Again, now we've got this conflict, and it looks like the US is getting dragged into. Now, what could happen? I have actually done a masterful update a couple of days ago, which really pretty much sums up my psyche right now of where I think things are going to head in the next few months. And this is the real test, the real shakeout before things hopefully get better. Nobody can guarantee it. Okay? So 2 days in counting till FOMC, war headlines, macro data, high volatility week ahead, of course, to open Monday. Primary drivers, of course, is we've got the Fed decision making and inflation, global uncertainty. And I think what's going to happen is Jerome's going to come out and talk about sticky inflation. The most recent US retail inflation print came softer than expected, defying tariff impacts for the second month in a row. Yet policymakers have stated clearly no rate cuts until Trump's tariff agenda is resolved. Conclusion, Fed to remain the same, status quo. Most volatile day is Wednesday. We know this, why it matters. First Fed meeting post-Israel-Iran war. And I think his language will be more scrutinized, okay? Because what he will say is, more uncertainty and whatever. We weren't expecting that, so let's leave Jerome alone. We've got bigger problems. Now, where the issue for me, the reason why I think our bull market can be nuked or delayed at the very least is Middle East still on fire. Iran has told mediators in Oman they're not really wanting to negotiate a ceasefire while still under attack. And of course, if escalations follow, Iran's oil and infrastructure are hit. You've got Iran holding 13% of global oil reserves. Huge. Mostly 84% or 80% goes to the Far East, mostly China. Any disruption here will ripple into the CPI, right? Consumer price index, inflation would go higher. Of course, that then goes into the Fed's typical playbook of inflation higher, sticky, and we're going to keep it tight for longer. Historical inflation reminder, in 2022, invasion happened, Russia, Ukraine, oil prices went from $90 to $130. 10-year yield went from 1.97 to 3.35. CPI peaked at 9.1. Today, oil prices is there or thereabouts around that $73 mark. 10-year yield is 4.4%, of course, which is higher now than then. And Fed funds is at 5.2 to 5.5%. The inflation fire isn't out. It's just waiting for oxygen. And I think they've got the oxygen now with the bloody war, right? This is going to be something that we get on the next CPI print, for sure. Higher energy prices. And this will reflect on both food and transportation because both rely on energy. Sticky inflation narrative to return, Fed to stay restrictive, possibly pushing cuts even further out. Now, the market was expecting that we go get some cuts in September and December, but this could be potentially something that has a real consequences. Real yields potentially moving towards 5% danger zone, Trump and Besant's threshold, okay? So the only thing we can do is watching the tone, right? We know what to expect, but does he nuke us further with a bunch of concerns? I expect that. 10-year yield, watch the break above the 4.5%. Dixie, breakout to put pressure on crypto. DXY, that's always a real one. Oil, of course, if Brent crosses $90 to 100, that definitely will then show in the CPI. Now, of course, this is all governed on top of that by this crazy volatility from this crazy war. Fed unlikely to cut in September or December if things still go nuts with the geopolitical situation. We're entering the critical weeks of summer. In addition to that, we've got the war. In addition to that, we've got the friggin' tariffs. So right now, the picture doesn't look good. So what do? How do we survive? Yes, we've survived worse, but the last 6 months have clearly been from another planet. So what do we do now? Well, this is what I'm thinking. At the moment, I'm just looking at good tokens I would have, right? I would hold. Regardless of market cap, this is Ondo that has bottomed previously on several occasions. And each time it does a nice little rip here. But this last rip wasn't enough, in my opinion. Ondo is a very, very attractive proposition. Even if you don't want to have a big cap of 2 billion plus, right? You could get something else, Other ones that I'm looking at, for example, I'm looking at the Sui ecosystem. I'm trying to... Cash is always a big victim in these conflicts, unfortunately. And we have seen cash go to 5 cents several times, 6 cents. Right now, it's around that 0.725. So one strategy, one way of dealing with this nightmare is to say to yourself, look, I don't give a fuck where the market is right now. And I can see here on the weekly, on the daily, RSIs are pretty much overbought, right? Oversold, sorry. So, if we come down a bit more, fine. If not, I'm actually going to go and buy just my conviction plays. And just, if your bags are packed, just chill out. Don't do nothing, right? You don't have to do anything. That's the beauty of this. If you wanted to get some low caps, just understand that first money rotation we're starting to see right now is going from BTC, right? This is what's happened with and you can see the on-chain post that I did last week into ETH. That's already happened. That's confirmed, right? Then what's going to happen is it's going to go from ETH, that's going to run a bit, into large caps. So your Suis, your Says, not even your Says, your Suis, your Avalanches, and, those big cap plays will, and then, of course, ultimately your, $1 billion plus plays. And then there's going to be your mid caps, right? And then there's going to be your low caps. So this is going to be how the bull market's going to go. But what we're seeing is the first phase from BTC into ETH, right? And then for that, what we want is a Bitcoin dominance. So we can go from from ETH to large caps to mid caps to low caps. And of course, you can say maybe low caps, anything under 100 million, mid caps, anything under $1 billion up to $1 billion, and then large caps, anything above $1 billion. You can classify it, chop it in many different ways, but that is the order of the day. And if you are in a low cap, what you can hope for is a whale, because let's say, for example, let's say you're holding a micro cap, sub $1 million, right? So let's take, for example, ZF, or I don't know, Creo, okay, or let's say you're holding Marvia, you're holding any of these smaller market cap plays. If a whale comes in, if a big whale comes in, right, a massive whale comes in, and they buy, let's say, $50,000 of the token, because this is what happens in market rotation, the acceleration of your micro cap is going to be absolutely incredible, right? You are going to print. So what I'm doing is personally just understanding how that rotation works is, you will get your large caps to cash out of, but if you've got only DJ in place, right, then you better chill out. If you've got only large caps, you also better chill out, because of course you're waiting for Ethereum to go and do certain things before ultimately the market moves again. But that's what I would do. I would focus on just building my portfolio, looking to structure this in exactly what we're talking about in this manner. At least have, after BTC, at least have one large cap that you can take profit from, because in between, you're not holding ETH, right? And the large caps, of course, they will move, But that's the order of the day. So they get to, of course, they've already eaten. Now BlackRock is coming in. They're buying the second largest asset. And then, of course, your series, your avalanches, your large, super large caps will start flying off. I think you get the point. But in order to kill my emotion, I'm always looking at this particular chart. I call it the macro chart. It's the same for like things like Beam, for example, right? So if you look at Beam, no one's interested. Like it's $5,400 per million right now. But if you look at the number of times we've come down, we had that wick in July last year, boom, boom. But it's all within this level here. Now, the market cap of this is way, way below where it was, let's say, when it was trading here. And right now, or even here. And right now, it's sub $500 million. This should go to like 5 to 10 billion or more. But I'm just DCAing. That's it. I don't have any emotions here. I buy a little bit here, a little bit there, average it out. And again, if this thing ranges in a range of 20% up or down, I don't give a shit, right? I don't care because I can just buy and just forget it. And when the market conditions are right, I'll be able to sell it in a crazy, euphoric manner. But what we're talking about here right now is as long as this chart remains, right? Let me just clear some of these. Your Bitcoin dominance, right, is really, really resurgent. And as long as Bitcoin dominance is doing this, not even this, at least we had this bit of, this has been a very good resistance for Bitcoin dominance. You could see this level just time and time again, just coming and knocking it back down. It did also almost like 4 days in a row. So until Bitcoin dominance shows me a complete bearish sign into what's exactly going to happen, just like previous bull cycles in 2017 and 2021, then I'm not emotionally involved. All I can do is just buy. And again, if I make a bad choice, so be it. But we had 2017 bull market here. We had 2021 bull market here, right? And now we are waiting for 2025. Look how, and even if we say we get a spike a bit more, this is now proving to be a resistance. But if we flip this level into support, again, all I can do is just go to the top currently, and you can clearly see there is a substantial potential for Bitcoin dominance to go absolutely ballistic and drop to the floor, right? Ultimately, in 2018, look where it bottomed, right? 2017, we had this here, February 2018, January 2018. And then in 2021, of course, we had this bottom in here between May and ultimately January 2022, November, December. But the lowest wick was January 2022. I'm expecting the same. And these bull markets are about the same range in terms of the number of days anyway, about 1,400 days or so. And because of that, I am emotionless. I am absolutely emotionless of what happens in that period for the Bitcoin dominance decline. And you can see here, in terms of the number of days, it doesn't even matter. But it doesn't get any more clear than that. It is overbought here, sorry. And even if we go a little bit more, I'm expecting, Bitcoin dominance to do something like this, guys. It's done it here. I mean, look how clear that is. Back in December, kind of 2015, 2016, boom. The decline happened. And then ultimately we bottomed here in June to July 2016 here. But look, if you look over here, it was until January 2018 that we did actually bottom. You can see the wicks there. You could see the wicks in this range here. That's why it was such a good bull market there. But so far, we've only got teeny weeny nothing over here. So, if we do this, where could we go? And in my opinion, I don't think we go higher than 72 at most. That could be one theory. If not, we keep resisting and then boom. This will be a spectacular decline. And I suspect what will happen here is, let's just do that again, because I think ultimately, let me just delete this again. If you look at Bitcoin dominance here, guys, right? So from where we are, June, right, into July, September, perhaps then the Fed pivots, and then we start seeing this. So you could see Bitcoin dominance then doing whatever it wants to do in 26, 27. But the dates are very, very interesting here. That would put us in range of anything between, I believe, March at the most of 2026. And that's if the Fed delays the pivot, or we could still, November should be the natural date to February this year. Sorry, October to November this year, or Q1 up till March next year. So there you have it. That's the clarity. That's the level of, calmness that I have, because, I've been in this game for years, and it made me an animal with rules to this thing, and I wrote a manual, step-by-step booklet for you to get your game on track. Uno. All right, guys. Finally, our boy here is causing more havoc.
It's unclear President Trump abruptly leaving the G7, where leaders had just issued a communique backing Israel, but pointedly not calling for a ceasefire. French President Macron setting a hopeful tone.
An offer has been made to have a ceasefire and to initiate broader discussions, and I think this is a very good thing.
But so much for G7 unity. The US president...
Anyway, stay safe out there, guys. I've given you a lot. Give me a like on the video.